Today, I wanted to challenge myself more than I have done for the last few paintings. I wanted to pick something pretty complicated to see if I could manage it. Now, I've put the painting up in the top right, so it's there all along, so you can kind of see which bit I'm working on. Because this painting is so complicated, it's hard to know which bit I'm working on exactly and how it ends up, if it works or doesn't work. So I'm not gonna lie, this was complicated. It was hard. It was a bit of a grind. But the concepts are the same. The process is exactly the same. It's just a bit more difficult. You gotta understand where the layers are. Now, I'm not talking about Procreate layers or Photoshop layers. That's a different thing. I'm talking about actually layers in a painting. So we've got the sky, we've got the clouds, we've got the mountain, we've got foliage, and slightly on that layer is one layer of the waterfall thing, and then we got another foliage layer in front of that, where it's a little bit more of the waterfall, and then we got rocks and a bit of land or whatever, and then another part of the waterfall. Then we got another set of rocks and another part of the waterfall. Then we got the actual water. Then we got the foreground. So we got like 10 layers, to be honest. And when that's in Procreate, it could be 20, 30 or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'm not talking about layers per se, but you have to break up a complicated painting like this into separate big shapes. And that's all I do anyway, but usually it's only like 3 or 4 layers, so in your brain that's not so bad. But when you start hitting 6, 7, 8, it starts to get really, really difficult. And I'm not saying that it's any different. It's just the load on your brain starts to get a bit too much. But to make it simple, or as simple as we can possibly make a complicated painting, is try not to think about the painting as a whole all the time, because that's just too much for us. Just think about an area at a time, and we'll bring it together at the end. So we just got to concentrate on one area at a time. So there's still like 7, 8 areas or something like that. So it is confusing because there's so many things going on, but what I try to do is just like kind of break the painting up into like 4 parts, 5 parts, and just worry about each one at a time. Easier said than done, of course, and I understand this is not easy. I found this very difficult. Like I said, I'm not gonna pretend that this was easy. It was not. I'm using reference. I got a bunch of reference on my so you're looking at my tablet on my desk here, and I got a monitor in front of me. So I got a bunch of references of what I want to achieve. It looks roughly like this, but I don't follow it exactly. So as you can see, I'm working on the rocks right now, and the sun is coming from the top left. So I'm building up layer by layer on the actual same layer, by the way, that the sun is hitting it. So I just go lighter and lighter and lighter slowly. The slower you go, the better gradations you're gonna have, because hopefully you notice I'm not even using brushes, so I don't have pressure sensitivity. And I have used brushes, and I have used traditional, airbrushes and whatever to paint. But I'm finding this method of using the select tool and color fill is much better for me. It's working for me because I can see it in layers rather than it all kind of mushing together, which happens if you use brushes. I'm not saying this technique is easy, though. It's not. And yeah, early days it was hard for me. But one thing I like about using this method is it makes you have to choose exactly what you're doing. When you're using brushes, you kind of just messing about, and no surprise, quite often it gets messy, and your pixels, your brushes, your colors, your whatever, they go into a place where you didn't really mean to. Now with this method, I can. That's not really possible because everything is very specific. Um, so you'll see me often, even though it's 4 times speed, you'll see me pause now and again. I didn't cut those out. It's generally I'm thinking, and I'm thinking, what's next? Where do I go? And for me, it works that I jump around the painting and bring the quality level up bit by bit in certain areas. And I try not to wait too long to give an area a bit more detail and more interest. One thing to note is once you have so the simple process is you have a big shape and you break that shape up into little shapes and you keep the colors and the values roughly the same to whatever the originating color is. So I'm working on the background green now. So I want a soft blue green. So this blue green needs to blend in with the background. Now, if I went like crazy green, it wouldn't work because it would be in your face and it would just be wrong. So you have to make sure that whatever you're using to break up the shape is a close color value, brightness, etc., to that shape in the first place. So obviously, when you see my little scribbles here, they are just scribbles. I'm kind of making shapes very very quickly. I mean, even though it's sped up 4 times, it's still very fast anyway. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to overthink little shapes. I mean, there is no real shape to foliage and things like that. So to be quick, it just helps me out, not get too tight and not think about shapes for that kind of thing. Now, I'm not gonna say that that always works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you do a bad shape. You gotta undo those. And when I started this kind of style, I was undoing a lot more than I'm undoing now. So don't don't worry if it's a slow process for you. It might look quick for me now, but it was slow as well for me. So take your time. It isn't about speed; it's finding your speed. And if your speed is much much slower, then that's okay. So don't worry about trying to replicate other people's speed. Just go at your pace, and if your pace is relatively slow, then that's fine too. Whatever works for you. Just find what works for you. Not Don't copy what I'm doing. Make sure it works for you. And if you want to bring in brushes a lot more, then do that too. You will see me using a brush now and again. It's the technical pen or something. Doesn't really matter. I'm just using any brush that is basically going to replicate the style of what I've got. So it's a hard brush and it's got stabilization in it because obviously this is a kind of vector look where everything's clean. So I don't really want a soft brush. That wouldn't suit the style. So what I'm trying to say here is you really got to concern yourself with consistency. So I've got lots of sharp edges. Now, if I do switch to a brush, which I do now and again because the smaller details is quite hard to do the selection tool. So if you're going to have little details, I just use a technical pen or whatever it's called, but it doesn't really matter what it's called. It's just a hard edge with stabilization on. So what I'm trying to do here is just build up the layers. Like I said, not the layers as in Procreate, is I'll have layers in my head that I want to do. So that means that every layer in Procreate might have a new bunch of layers in my head that I want to happen. Now you could make them all layers in Procreate, I suppose, but you would have 100 layers or something like that, which is fine. And some people don't mind doing that. But the problem I find is if you have too many layers, you don't know which layer you're on, and they can be hard to find. I think there is an option in Procreate though that when you click on something, it automatically selects the layer. That's quite handy. So try that if you do want lots of layers. But I found it was selecting the wrong layer sometimes. But it's well, not the wrong layer. It was the right layer, but it's just not the one I meant. So I tried to keep the layers low because it just adds to complexity, and this is supposed to be fun. I'm not trying to engineer something as such, so I want it to be loose and flowing. And if I could do this on one layer, I probably would, and I could try that. I could try that, to be honest. But obviously, the one thing you're gonna lose if you got too few layers is if you get the colors wrong or the contrast wrong or the or anything. You can't manipulate it. Now, the more experience you get, the less you have to manipulate things, so the less layers you need. But early on, and if you're being experimental, layers are great because we can come back and we can change things. And I didn't actually adjust that much in this painting. It's not to say I got it right. It was just the painting was so complicated that if there's one thing when you adjust something though, so keep in mind, say I make something darker or lighter somewhere, that affects the entire painting. And I was a little bit overwhelmed with how many layers I had. I'm not sure how many I had, 20, 30. And the problem there is if I change one layer, it means I have to change another 7 layers or something. And I was not really willing to do that. So that's why I didn't adjust too much. And it kind of turned out okay anyway. So sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But not to say I didn't adjust them. I did. So you'll see me in the hue, saturation, brightness thing, whatever is the adjustment layer. Have a look in the adjustment layer, and you can the toolbar, sorry, and you can mess around quite a lot. But I was saying, you know, try and stick to your decisions, and even if the decisions are wrong, that's okay because you're learning something. And endless tweaking, endless adjusting is probably not going to get you too far. You need to kind of go with your gut, and that will serve you well. If you're adjusting constantly, it's really like you are miles away from what you actually needed in the first place. But I understand that you might be miles off, so that's fine. That's what digital is about, adjustments, and it's so cool you can do that. And if you have to adjust everything, then do it. But it's nice to leave your painting kind of where it was, just to see, like, okay, oh, that's kind of wrong, etc. So I'm putting lots of detail in here now. If you watched my other video, probably not even that long ago, I stress be careful with too much detail. Now, detail can make a mess, to be honest, but I want to caveat that you can have lots of detail, but it has to be within the color range and the value of where you're adding. So you can go absolutely nuts as long as it's within the value range and color range of what you're doing, and it'll work. But this kind of advanced, to be honest. So if you're struggling, keep things simple. If you're struggling to do this kind of painting, I would say don't go anywhere near something like this anyway. Keep it much, much more simple. Have like 2 or 3 big shapes and break them up and see how you get along with that. And that is difficult enough in itself, so there's no point going here. But I like to do these now and again. It's quite hard and draining, to be honest, and it's not something I would like to do constantly because it is hard work. Whereas in the other ones are more like a sketch. They're 30 minutes. They're fun, and not easy either, but relatively straightforward. And I wanted to put something in this painting to make it some sort of scene. Now, if you put a person or an animal in, you get that kind of for free just by doing that, and it makes some sort of story. I don't generally do it because I find it difficult um, to make it work. So I've been looking at lots of other paintings, anime paintings and things like that, to see how you get a person into your painting, because they always do that. And I thought, let's try and get some, a little person in there. You probably don't want a face and stuff like that because they take too much focus away from the landscape. I think it's okay. Now I'm just putting effects in at the end. Don't overdo these, and I probably did. So luckily, I think I will tone it down a little bit in a minute. But one thing is kind of crucial for landscape paintings is the sun and the lighting. And what you want to try and do is make some parts of your painting really bright, like the sun's hitting it, and make sure you got enough areas that are not sunny. Um, Easier said than done, I get it. But I hope I've helped some made some sort of sense here, and how I go about doing this kind of thing is tricky, definitely tricky. My timer's stopped, so clearly the timer's a bit off there. But I hope you liked this. If you did, give me a sub and a like. It's massively helpful, and I'll paint more like this in the coming weeks. So thank you.